Welcome to the Dark Ozarks. We are discussing the dark history of the Ouachitas and their Ozarks connections. Actually, this is part 2 of the discussion. But first, we want to remind you that the Dark Ozarks podcast is now available on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or about any other podcast platform. So many people may be wondering why we're discussing an area outside of the Ozarks proper. Why are we talking about spaces outside of the geological lines of the Ozarks?
Well, maybe the Ozarks and the Ouachitas have a few secrets. But I think the similarities really go a lot deeper than a lot of people would realize. And those lines and borders are a bit fuzzier, and the connections and the influences that connect the two really are very, very significant, from Healing Waters, obviously, as we mentioned, Lost Treasures, and Wild West Shootouts.
We will return to the Ouachitas and the Ozarks, but first we want to invite you to like, follow, and subscribe to Dark Ozarks on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platform. We also invite you to become a Dark Ozarks subscriber on Facebook. On the Dark Ozarks Facebook page, click subscribe, have your login information ready, and join Dark Ozarks behind the scenes for only $4.99 per month.
Your $4.99 per month subscription allows you to come with us on paranormal investigations, deep dive research, and topics too controversial for public view. The next 100 subscribers will be entered in a drawing for a free Dark Ozarks t-shirt and an exclusive signed first-run copy of the book, Dark Ozarks, The Spook Bite. Subscribe today to be entered in the drawing.
And now you can get Dark Ozarks t-shirts for sale at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com.
We encourage you to check out Always Buying Books in Joplin, Missouri, in person and online, on Facebook, and at the website alwaysbuyingbooks.com for all of your reading needs, including a large section on paranormal, history, and more. Not to mention, the building is haunted. Tell Bob and Elise that we sent you.
We also want to thank Beard Engine Brewing Company in Alba, Missouri. Beard Engine Brewing is the only English-style brewery in Missouri and has been twice named Missouri's best brewery by the Missouri Brewers Association. Great beer and great food in a historical building with a noir past. And yes, their building is also haunted. Tell Nate and Tiff that we sent you.
So perhaps an interesting point to jump into here on our short format on YouTube is some comparative differences and comparative similarities between Hot Springs and Eureka Springs, Hot Springs being located in the Ouachita Mountains, Eureka Springs being located in the Ozarks.
Yes, definitely. Arkansas is known for its healing waters.
It is, and very different. The two cities certainly share some bird's eye view similarities, but the history of them is very different, and the waters themselves are very different. Hot Springs is named Hot Springs for a reason, and in terms of the temperature that the water's coming out, and creating this. Also, Hot Springs was a tourist and healing waters destination from very early, surprisingly early in the 19th century, whereas Eureka Springs really began to develop only after the Civil War.
That's true. Hot Springs, I found it interesting that it really goes back a long ways. They know that early European traders and settlers went to the springs much before there was settlement, as well as Native Americans. And the Dunbar Hunter expedition that was sent out by President Jefferson, which was actually the first expedition into the Louisiana Purchase, discovered the springs and discovered that they really weren't vacant, that there were a lot of people there, including Europeans. And they noted how warm they were, 130 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit.
And, a region, an area, an epic really that I think surprises people is very, very early in post-colonial American history was the development of tourism.
Yes, we don't really think of tourism other than, I guess, a post-automotive experience for most people, other than the ultra rich. But there really was a lot of tourism for those who had even fairly modest means.
And something that we see, and I'm conjecturing here in this particular case, but the furthered excuse that traveling to a place like Hot Springs in particular, or Eureka Springs, or other healing springs may have given individuals with less financial means a bit of an impetus to travel, in the sense that, just literally as simple as, if the springs help, we could get a vacation, but it also wouldn't be a wasted trip.
Exactly. You don't have to feel guilty about it.
And as this is jumping regions, but with the Ouachitas and Arkansas, we are dealing with a deep South state, and a very much a part of the American South, not one state over in Mississippi and on the Gulf Coast and Biloxi. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that antebellum tourism in Biloxi was a big deal, and it was heavily influenced by the development of the rail and the fact that for comparatively little money, New Orleans folks could get on the train and in a short period of time be at a beachfront hotel and be enjoying the breeze and the reduced humidity, and having gotten away from the low delta land. And at the same time, and I still find this absolutely fascinating, that, for example, 11 miles off the coast of Biloxi, Ship Island first of all, had Fort Massachusetts. It was a Union garrison and a prisoner of war camp for Confederate soldiers. One that they did not have to put picket guards because nobody could swim the distance to any other chunk of land.
Yes, and same thing as Alcatraz, same principles. Made it easier in that regard. It is a fascinating area. I love Biloxi when I've been there before, but it is interesting that this theme of health and rejuvenating waters spurred tourism before tourism was a thing in North America.
Very much so. And just as a conclusion on the Biloxi and Ship Island point, the fact that beachfront tourism did continue during the Civil War, and you had Southerners enjoying the Gulf of Mexico on vacation, while 11 miles up the coast, you had Confederate prisoners of war eking out an existence at Ship Island.
A very ironic dichotomy.
It is. But back to Hot Springs, something that I think is reasonable to say, because of course the Hot Springs are still a very important part of Hot Springs tourism. That there does seem to be some very real therapeutic benefits that are associated with the waters, and an enormous amount of latter 19th century and early 20th century history has developed as well as some really, really beautiful and phenomenal architecture in regards to the bathhouses and the resort hotels that have grown up, and an enormous amount of really complex history. Eureka Springs, though developed much later, first of all, the waters are not hot. They're mineral waters that were coming out of the mountain at much, much cooler temperatures. But the area, and I think, again, both areas, it does get a little fuzzy in terms of piecing out the comparatives, because the marketing from going back well into the 19th century, the tourism marketing relied heavily upon this as a Native American tradition. And so it can be difficult to parse out reality from marketing fiction. That said, as you noted with Hot Springs, with the Dunbar expedition, but also with others, that before there were brochures about the region, there were Native Americans and others frequenting the region for therapeutic reasons.
Yes, and that continues, as you said, to today in Hot Springs, more so than in Eureka Springs.
Yes.
And I think that's very ironic, that continuity with Hot Springs. And we will be talking about this in more depth in the long version video that will be uploaded tomorrow. We invite you to come back, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things in the Ouachitas and how they relate to the Ozarks. So don't miss that. In the meantime, don't forget to check out upcoming events and merchandise at darkozarks.com and paranormalsciencelab.com. Thank you again to Always Buying Books and Beard Engine Brewing Company for helping to bring the Dark Ozarks to everyone.
On the next episode, we are going to be discussing the dark history of the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. Catch the Dark Ozarks podcast on Branson Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or about any other podcast platform. Thank you, everyone. And remember, there are no easy answers,